Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to see so many of you online for this important topic, and we're really looking forward to a great discussion. My name is Allison Marks, and I will be your moderator today. I'm the Communications Manager at SDSN Trends, a global research network working to improve evidence-based decision-making within government to address sustainable development challenges through the use of innovative and high-quality data sources and methods. This webinar is the 26th in a series hosted by the UN Statistics Division as part of the continuing conversation between UN data forums. The next forum will take place in Hangzhou, China on April 24th through 27, 2023, and I'm sure many of you are looking forward to joining. I know I am. Like the forum, the webinar series aims to share experiences and foster an open dialogue between the global community of data producers and users, and includes individuals across government, academia, civil society, NGOs, and the private sector to spur data innovation, mobilize high-level political and financial support for data, and build a pathway to better data for sustainable development. Coming off the heels of the recent UN Stats Commission, we have a very exciting topic to discuss, which is enabling a data-driven culture between the national and city level. How can national statistics offices and city data officers work together? We'll hear from an esteemed group of panelists from Mexico, Los Angeles, Jakarta, and the Philippines, representing both the city and National Statistics Office perspectives on the challenges and opportunities of enabling a data-driven culture within their governments, what NSOs can learn from experiences of their counterparts at the city level in fostering greater data stewardship, and what is needed to encourage greater collaboration between these two communities. First, I'll briefly set the stage on this issue. As many of you know, over the past several years, there has been an explosion in new technologies and data sources and a push for greater data-driven decision-making within government. This has, of course, proven especially true during the current COVID-19 pandemic. Smart cities in particular have been at the forefront of innovation around using data for better service delivery and government performance, as well as to enhance citizen engagement. And to respond to the unprecedented data collection, production, and analysis demands facing national and local governments today, many cities and national governments around the world have instituted a Chief Data Officer or CDO position to improve their data stewardship for better service delivery and policymaking. And regardless of the size of their team or the scope of their responsibilities, CDOs share a common goal: to increase capacity for making data-driven decisions in government, and data stewardship is a key facet of their role. Within this backdrop, and to better understand how the experiences of CDOs at the city and subnational levels can inform NSOs, SDSN Trends conducted initial research on this issue as part of the United Nations Statistics Commission's Working Group on Data Stewardship. Preliminary research results indicate the importance of an enabling environment, including state and national laws regarding data privacy and access to information, and having the ability to influence across organizational boundaries by establishing the right kinds of relationships across government. It also demonstrated the benefits of demonstrating value to policymakers to break down data silos, and importantly, that there is a clear need for greater knowledge exchange between the NSO and city communities to enhance capacity development. I look forward to delving further into these issues during our discussion, as we have an outstanding list of speakers who each bring significant experiences and expertise to this topic and will share their insights. So before we dive into the session, just a couple of very brief housekeeping notes. First, the session will flow as follows. We'll hear 4 presentations from each of the speakers, and I'll introduce them before each of their presentations, and then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. Secondly, we'll use the chat function to communicate during the webinar. It's the icon that looks like the speech bubble below your screen. And we've also received a large number of questions submitted beforehand that have helped to shape the conversation, and we've selected a few of the panelists, to submit to the panelists to address later in the Q&A session. But of course, we encourage you to share questions throughout the webinar and comments as they arise. And of course, I'll try to get to as many of them as possible. So to kick things off and get a sense of who is in our audience today, I invite you to type in where you're joining from. I know a lot of you have done this, the sector that you represent, for example, NSO or private sector, and the first thing that comes to mind when you think of smart cities. So I will pause that for a little bit. Looks like we've got a bunch from Toronto, Poland, Warsaw, the private sector, Rome, Italy, the Hewlett Foundation, Municipality of The Hague, so many different sectors. Very great. Smart data needs to be inclusive for accessing the different people. Jamaica, UN Habitat. So great to see so many of you joining the conversation. So now we're going to dive into the speaker presentations. And without further ado, I'm pleased to introduce Eduardo Sojo, who will present his experiences within the Mexico National Statistics System. Eduardo is the director of Mexico's National Laboratory of Public Policy at the Center for Economic Research and Teaching, which combines data sciences, behavioral economics, and collective intelligence. He was president of Mexico's National Institute of Statistics and Geography, which many of you know as INEGI, as well as Mexico's Secretary of Economy, coordinator of the Economic Cabinet, and chief of public policy. He's also an expert member of SDSN Trends, president of the OECD's Bureau of Statistics and Statistical Policy, and co-president of the Experts on Geospatial Information. So over to you, Eduardo.
Thank you, Alison, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for inviting me to this webinar of the UN World Data Forum. If I wanted to synthesize in a few words what I'm going to say, I will say the following. Most of us live in cities, and therefore, most of the important decisions that affect our daily life are taken in cities. However, in the statistical community, we have had not paid much attention of the information that decision makers need in cities to optimize their decisions. By doing so, we are missing an important opportunity. Next slide, please. In Mexico, and I guess in most of the world, statistical information systems were constructed for decision makers at national level. If we think of economic surveys, the sample design were designed to obtain national figures. The same is true for the consumer price index, employment, and many other indicators. I believe we have been very successful to inform decision makers at national levels, but we are not being very successful in doing the same for decision makers at local levels. Although the situation has changed over the years, in Mexico, for example, we have a huge periodicity, very good periodicity in terms of economic or population housing census. We have economic census every 5 years. In the years ended on 4 and 9, and we have either population and housing census or inter-census surveys also every 5 years in the years ended in 0 and 5. However, important problems still exist for decision makers at local levels, even in a very robust statistical information system as the one Mexico has. So we believe there are many opportunities to reinforce the support of city data officers, especially in this data revolution world. Next slide. Let me say a few words about Mexico. Mexican NSO, INEGI, is a leading edge institution. It has constitutional autonomy from the federal government. It is like the central bank, but in terms of information. I don't know of any other statistical office in the world that has such a strong autonomy. INEGI has also statistics and geospatial information systems within the same institution, which is also a rare situation in our community, but a very powerful instrument nowadays that we want to combine statistical and geospatial information in every economic, social, or environmental aspect. INEGI has also a very well-established national system of statistical and geographical information called SNIEG. However, there is no mention in the law that regulates SNIEG about how local statistical systems should be organized or what could be the role of INEGI in promoting them. INEGI has made some efforts to amend this situation, but municipalities are still very poorly represented in SNIEG. We try to document that in a case study that has been published by Trends. Next slide, please. In the case study, we found that in local governments, at least in the case of Mexico, it makes sense to have in the same institution the planning and the information provider responsibilities, because these institutions work across the government. However, local planning institutions lack the knowledge, experience, and resources to build by their own robust statistical and geospatial information systems to inform decision makers. Planning institutions in local governments could be in an extraordinary position to be the data stewardship if they have the institutional support from national statistical offices to develop the institutional capacity to play this role. City data officers would be a very interesting partner of National Statistical Office. We have been debating in the last few years about data stewardship at a country level. I think we need to start debating now data stewardship at a local level. Next slide, please. We also found that the role of city data officers at local levels is very different than the roles of the roles at national statistical offices, as they work more from more grounded data systems and are very, very close to decision makers. They are more data analysts and data scientists than data producers. They identify and transform internal and external data into strategic information to be used by decision makers within the municipal public administrations. They usually don't provide data. They provide information to be used. City data officers also monitor data in real time to respond to problems in the city regarding mobility, sewage, trash pickup, water, and public lighting services, among others. Next, please. In short, in Mexico, it is clear that the role of national statistical offices is highly needed for capacity building if states and municipalities are to be important players in a data revolution framework. It is also a huge opportunity. Establishing a process for sustained knowledge sharing between city data officers and NSOs will help to better understand the use of data to inform decision makers making at local levels and find opportunities for improving the process of data dissemination so that it is better fit for use. I will end as I started, saying that most of us live in cities, and therefore most of the important decisions that affect our daily life are taken in cities. However, in the statistical community, we have not paid much attention of the information that decision makers in cities need to optimize their decisions. And by doing so, we are missing an important opportunity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Eduardo, for such a great case study and presentation. I found it was so interesting, the fact that Mexico has such a robust national statistics system, but there are still so many gaps at the state and municipality levels, and there's some real great opportunities there. So I look forward to delving into that a little bit further in the Q&A, but thank you for this great presentation. I think next we are going to get a perspective from the city level, and our next panelist I'm pleased to welcome is Jean Holm, Deputy Mayor for the Mayor's Office of Budget and Innovation for the City of Los Angeles. Jean wears many hats. In addition to her role at the Mayor's Office, she is a distinguished instructor at UCLA, trustee of Claremont Graduate University, fellow of the UN International Academy of Astronautics, and SDSN Trends expert member. And she also leads a startup promoting equity, education, and social justice through technology and education programs worldwide. Previously, she was the evangelist for open data for the White House during the Obama administration, the chief knowledge architect at NASA, a senior consultant for the World Bank on African open data, and has had several other roles across government and private sector. So I'll turn it over to you, Jean.
Great. Thank you so much, Allison. And I'm glad that everybody was able to join us today. Hope you're all safe and well during the hopefully end days of this pandemic. I wanted to give a perspective that's perhaps unique, having come from federal government to the local government sector. So I've spent 40 years in federal government and the last 5 working for my hometown, which is the city of Los Angeles. To put some context, I'm sure you're familiar with Los Angeles, but just to put some context, we have 4 million residents, 10 million residents in the greater LA area, 500 square miles. It's a complex city. It's the 13th largest economy in the world. And so as a result, the ways in which we manage data, we make decisions in Los Angeles are often reflective of how people do things in other countries as well. Before I came to the city, as Allison mentioned, I was the architect and evangelist for data.gov, which is the federal data sharing platform for the US government. And then when I went to the World Bank, I helped other nations like Sierra Leone and Uganda and India and Rwanda help to open up some of their data on open government platforms. So it's interesting to see the difference in approach and the similarities between national statistics offices, open data ecosystems, shall we call them, and local city governments and municipalities. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that for data.gov, we realized early on the need to connect to local data, because when people were trying to make decisions, when businesses wanted to get access to data, when individual groups were advocating for a different aspect or some issue around environmental justice or racial justice, that they really needed local data, because they really thought globally about these issues that were being challenged for their local constituents. But the problem is that they needed local data to act on it. And so on data.gov, we were actually able to import data, and there's about 10,000 local data sets on data.gov, import local data through open APIs and other standard methods to be able to let people search in context with the national statistical data, data from federal agencies, and then data from local governments as well. One of the things that is an interesting aspect of Los Angeles is that we have also worked to be able to do more equitable comparisons with other cities and other organizations around the world. So we as a city have adopted the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We've had 2 voluntary local reviews, and we share all our open data on those SDGs and measure how we're progressing or not against our 2030 goals. We also were recently admitted to the Open Government Partnership and are just about to publish our Open Government Action Plan. This helps us understand and compare ourselves to other cities, other nations around the world, making sure we're being open and transparent. As we were working on these efforts, it became very clear that one of the things that was important for the access to local data was also data ethics. So we've published our digital code of ethics, which is holding the developers and the managers and the funders of different activities at the city accountable for making sure that we are ethically collecting, managing, protecting, and creating algorithms equitably for the kind of data that we use. There's lots of stories about how algorithmic bias can be introduced, even with good intentions, by just the way in which people are selecting data, what kind of data they select, what parameters of data they collect, and then how they organize that in a way to be able to make predictive analytics. And while those are powerful tools, part of what we're hampered by is the ability to make sure everybody's using those in open and transparent ways. So I'm just going to talk briefly about 4 ways in which we really have needed in this last few years to connect to National Statistical Office data and to connect to other local municipality data and to connect to the private sector. And to do this, we really need to think about data standards, ethical use of data, and the ability to connect these collaborative communities together. So one, obviously, case study is around the COVID response. And so we think globally, but act locally. It's important for everybody to understand the trends across national efforts in COVID mitigation, but also watching the cases. In Los Angeles, because of where we are sort of in the realm, we would see cases rising in China, a few weeks later rising in Europe, a few weeks later rising in the East Coast of the United States. So we could actually, as the pandemic progressed, we would know based on what was happening in China and Europe, we would be able to predict the impact in Los Angeles weeks in the future because of this odd geography and the way in which the pandemic spread. It was also important for us to learn from other cities. So many people were sharing data, but we started sharing data in more standard formats during the pandemic. So we were able to better understand what impact mask wearing mandates had, what impact vaccination rates had, so that we could make sure that our rules in Los Angeles were making people as safe as possible while having the least number of restrictions as possible. And so the ability to connect local data to National Statistical Offices actually saved lives during the pandemic. And being able to do that in a global way, not just within a country, but in a global way, was essential. Another way in which we found that it's been very important is around the digital divide. So this is something where we're trying to let more people get connected to the internet. And there are multiple aspects around digital literacy and access to computers, but also just access to the internet. And that connectivity really is something we've learned that has to be done on a regional basis. So federal funding, state funding, local funding, philanthropy funding, all of these work together to help us close the digital divide, but it only works when we are able to share data about where people are having trouble connecting, where there's lack of broadband access, where internet companies are building and plan to build, and where we have infrastructure in the cities, counties, and states. And so again, trying to make sure that we're able to get more people connected is not something a city alone can do. And at the national level, it's also very difficult to do because the national level doesn't own much of the infrastructure that telecommunication companies build on. A third example is around environmental justice. And I think this is one that's probably really understandable for folks because things like air quality and water quality don't stop at an artificial city boundary or don't stop at a national boundary. So one of the projects we're working on is with NASA. So we have a NASA grant around a project called Predicting What We Breathe, which uses data from satellites, which is available globally in open data formats, and data from the ground sensors we have in Los Angeles. And we combine those together using machine learning algorithms to be able to predict out into the future what our air quality is going to be like. It helps us understand the impact of local decisions and policies around air quality and traffic mitigation. And it helps us understand issues around the effect of being able to plan events. We've recently held a workshop with dozens of global cities because this is something that's actually helpful for cities everywhere. And so when we combine national statistical data, federal agency data about air quality globally, and then apply it to a city level, it can be really important. And as all cities, we are a global city. And in fact, part of our work has been leading up to the 2028 Olympics. So when we think about, national statistical data and its importance, but actually working at the local level, we have to realize that we, as Eduardo said, we live in cities, we participate in cities, we celebrate in cities, and those cities are hosting national, worldwide events. And those are ones that we want to make sure that we're sharing data and using data to make safe for everybody.
Thank you so much, Jean, for such a great presentation. I think, just the fact that you've, outlined the connections across, the Olympics and COVID and environmental challenges, just, the fact that we really need to expand, decision-making, from just not from the local level, but across kind of the national and global level is really, really important. And I think I'll probably come back to you a little bit later, but I know that the city of Los Angeles has been really, really strong in enhancing citizen engagement through a number of different activities. So I'll come back to you later on that, but really great presentation and thank you again. So I think our next presenter we will turn to is Jawan Kangrawan, who is the head of data analytics and digital products at Jakarta Smart City in Indonesia. Jawan is tasked with fully utilizing data to formulate public policy and improve the quality of public services. And now analyzing complex and diverse urban data every day. He actively plans, builds, and delivers digital and data portfolios. He's currently building an exciting and innovative digital data ecosystem for Jakarta by developing and aligning a strategic partnership framework between Jakarta Smart City and other government agencies, business enterprises, research agencies, and universities. So Juan, I'll let you take it away. Over to you.
Sure, thank you very much. And I hope my voice is clear. So yeah, thanks for the kind introduction. And maybe before I go through my slides, just a quick notes from me. So yeah, I was told by the organizer to prepare a brief presentation, 7 to 8 minutes and 3 slides plus 1 appendix bonus from me. So hopefully I give you a good trigger. For sure, I'm keen to address some questions and discuss further during the panel discussion. So I try to relate a bit to the key topics for today's session. So for sure, a smart city, by nature, as a city, we need to work with multiple elements in the city ecosystem. Can be from the provincial government to the national government, to the business or industry, to the research agency, universities, and so on. So based on that perspective, I will share some of our works and how we can work concretely with some of those agencies as a case study and a learning journey. Thank you. So next slide, please. Yep, this is the first one. So just to share very briefly about smart city. So again, when we talk about Jakarta Smart City, we start with data for sure, but it is only the beginning of the journey. In the end, we want to build service, platform, hub, and ecosystem. I will not explain one by one in a very detailed manner, but for sure, when we talk about city, we can talk a lot of sources of data, including our own government agency. Even in Jakarta alone, we have around 200 to 300 government agencies, depends on the granularity. Started, let's say, from the transportation, environment, citizenship, education, and so on and so forth. So I think even until now, we are in the midst of consolidating all those critical data and how we can shape an integrated policy for decision making. I think that's the start of our journey. We are not only collecting data, but after we get data, let's say from the relevant government agencies with Internet of Things, sensors, open data, and so on, then we think, how can we make more value from that data? And that's why we build our services. Even we have our own so-called super apps for Jakarta, and there are so many services that have been built on top of that. But it's not, it doesn't stop there. We should build more and more exciting journey. That's why in the end, we want to build an ecosystem. So our success is not only referring to smart city as a unit, but how we can help digitalization, how we can help data-driven decision-making and culture across Jakarta and hopefully across national level in Indonesia. So we want to work together with other national government agencies, even with other provinces. Just FYI, currently we have been working with other provinces to replicate or to copy the smart city model to other government agencies, other provinces as well. So they learn from Jakarta and we give some services, some help, consultation, and so on. I think those are the exciting initiative and exciting direction that you can work together as a city. Next slide. So Jakarta Smart City is not only a government unit. Just in the last 2 years, we shift our administrative status as a regional service agency. It means we have more flexibility in terms of our operation, product development, hiring, and financial management as well. By doing that, we are not only serving our internal government agency in Jakarta, but we can provide more services to the other external players as well. Can be from the national agency, can be the industry, can be other provinces, and so on and so forth. That's why, specific from me for Jakarta, a Smart City Data team, we also built several data products and services. So you can see based on the data maturity and type and format. I will not explain in details, but we are not only providing dashboard, recommendation, and so on, but we want to build data model, API that can be used by other, let's say, technology companies, let's say with our integrated multimodal transportation, our bus operator, MRT, LRT, and so on. I think those are some of the examples. And let's say for the early warning system, we provide that, let's say, for traffic jam, for flood, even for the air quality. Just a quick context, we work with one of the global tech companies to build the Environmental Insights Explorer platform. So I think we have been using all those collaborations to build exciting initiative, product, and platform that will bring benefits to our citizens and all the ecosystem players. Next. I have many examples, including in my appendix. If you ask me, I can share more, but let me just take one of these examples, because I think in the last 2 years, we have been very busy with this global pandemic, COVID-19. And I think in Jakarta, there is positive sides for sure. It triggers innovation, it triggers digitalization, and it triggers the digital transformation. So we work very closely across many agencies. It has not done before, this kind of collaboration in this kind of scale and in this kind of speed. But I think that is one of the good results from the COVID-19 within Jakarta City. So we built this kind of dashboard, policy recommendation, API, even some of the strategic decisions like the social mobility limitation and the opening of schools, distribution of vaccination, and so on. It has been built and decided based on the data. And even we work as well with the various national ministry. Even we presented as well to some of the ministers, high-level director, decision makers as well. For sure, there will be certain administration, bureaucracy, and so on. But I think we've been working in a more closer collaboration, especially in this pandemic context. Next. This is my final slide. Initially, I put that in the appendix, but again, yeah, sorry, it is in Bahasa Indonesia, but it's the formal document whereby we have the President National Policy for Integrated Data. And there is one aspect whereby the national ministries, together with the provincial unit or agencies, we should work together hand in hand with certain clarity in terms of the boundary, in terms of the collaboration point, including with the data, statistics, and so on. I think I saw questions about the way or the difference between data and statistics. I think I'm more than happy to share that later on during the discussion. And I can share further how the national agencies, there are many of them, can work together, not only with Jakarta, but all the relevant 30 plus provincial government or agencies in Indonesia. I think that's the exciting case study that I can share. Can you go to the next slide for the last thank you notes? Yeah, okay, I think this is my last slide. So in the end, what I want to say here, I think in the end, national and provincial agencies, for sure, they have the boundary, they have the authority, but in the end, especially in the context of global pandemic and any global and strategic importance or crisis, we need to work hand in hand. We should collaborate. We should make a seamless collaboration and integration, especially from the data and digital products. I think that is the case study and sharing from me, representing Jakarta Smart City. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joan, for your great presentation. And I know there were comments in the chat about sharing the slides and PDF afterwards, and I'm sure you and statistics colleagues will.
Quick notes from me, Alison. I have my standard public presentation slides. It is more comprehensive than that. I will share that very shortly. It is available, the link publicly for everyone. I will share that shortly in the chat feature. Thank you.
Fantastic. And also, I think just, just to reiterate some of the points from your presentation, I think you really highlighted the value of kind of working across organizational boundaries and with external actors to really shape kind of a whole of government data ecosystem. So really looking forward to discussing that further. But thank you again for your great presentation. And before we move on to our next presenter, I just wanted to encourage everyone to keep making comments and sharing resources in the chat. I know there was a resource from UN Habitat about their tracker that they developed with Canada. So please take a look at the chat and continue to share. All right, and our last presenter, who is last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Dennis Mapa, who is the National Statistician and Civil Registrar General for the Philippine Statistics Authority. In addition, as I mentioned, he'll provide sort of an NSO perspective on this topic. He was formerly Dean and Professor of Statistics at the University of the Philippines and President of the Philippine Statistical Association. He specializes in econometric and financial time series analysis, empirical economic growth, poverty analysis, and impact evaluation. So over to you, Dennis Mapa, for your presentation. Thank you.
Very much, Alison. Good evening, everyone. Good evening from the Philippines. My name is Dennis Mapa, and I will be presenting the experience of the Philippine Statistics Authority related to the topic of data-driven culture between the national and city-level statistician. As the central statistical authority in the country, the Philippine Statistics Authority plays a crucial role in delivering timely, relevant, and quality statistics for evidence-based policy, planning, and decision-making. My presentation will expound on the experiences and relevant programs of the Philippine Statistics Authority in enabling a data-driven culture between the National Statistical Office and the city-level data offices. In response to the emergence of new data needs, such as the need for more disaggregated data, the Philippine Statistics Authority has started the compilation of the Provincial Product Accounts, or the PPA. This aims to present a comprehensive picture of the provincial and highly urbanized cities' economies by providing a more appropriate measure and assessment of its economic performance. It is an input in crafting more informed economic policies and strengthening the planning and decision-making of provincial and city policymakers and stakeholders. For this to be successful, the regional and provincial statistics committees' ability of data support and other data requirements. The Philippine Statistics Authority also conducts consultation workshops with its local counterparts to ensure that the statistics produced are relevant to the local stakeholders. In 2021, the Philippine Statistics Authority compiled and reported the product accounts of 14 provinces and 6 highly urbanized cities. In 2022, additional 32 provinces and 7 highly urbanized cities will have their own product accounts, and by 2025, it is the vision of the Philippine Statistics Authority to institutionalize the provincial product accounts in all of our provinces and highly urbanized cities. Another means by which the Philippine Statistics Authority enables a data-driven culture is through one of its new mandates, or this technology-based system of collecting, processing, and validating necessary disaggregated data that may be used for planning, program implementation, and impact monitoring at the local level, while empowering communities to participate in the process. Through the CBMS, key development indicators can be made available for evidence-based at the local level, cities and municipalities, for planning and investment programming. With such data support, local level planning and program implementation can be linked with the development on level, more resilient health system, especially with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Philippine Statistics Authority regularly releases sub-national statistics on births and deaths, which were obtained from the offices of our local city and municipal civil registrars. The role of the city and municipal efficient and timely reporting of these vital statistics. Thus, the Philippine Vision Forum for the Interagency Committee to inform the agency partners and stakeholders about latest statistics on births, marriages, and deaths, and discuss issues on how to improve the civil registration and vital statistics system. As it navigates the intricacies of leadership, prioritize capacity development to ensure that the quality of statistics to be generated for all its programs and services is guaranteed. Existing challenges are addressed with the aid of technology and other enabling mechanisms. And yet it is important to take advantage of opportunities seen along the way. It can be in the form of tools and process standardization, capacity building, improvement of local data governance, and last but not the least, promotion and appreciation of the use of statistics, especially at the sub-national level, to foster a truly data-driven culture. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dennis Mappa, for your excellence to the PSA on all of your work that you're doing at the local and subnational level. I think there's been a lot of interest in the chat, particularly on the community-based monitoring system that you've been doing, and we can delve into that a little bit later, but excellent job. So I think we've got about half an hour or so to delve into the Q&A session. And I know there's lots of questions, but continue to drop them in the chat. First, we're going to begin with some of the pre-submitted questions for the panelists. And I'd ask if each of you could try to limit your responses to about 2 minutes each. I know that might be a little bit difficult, but we'll do our best because I know we want to get to as many questions as possible. So for the first question, I think it's regarding kind of the city level perspective. So I think Jean and Joanne, you'd be best placed to answer this question. So first, I'll say the question: how do city officials use official statistics in their work, and how would a closer relationship with the NSO help? Is there an enabling legal framework in your respective cities to foster this relationship? So Jean, I don't know if you want to take this one first, and then Joanne, you can provide some of the perspective from Jakarta. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Allison. And I love the chat. It's very vibrant, so appreciate everybody's questions. I also dropped a copy of the slides that reflect the work I just spoke about in there as well. So I think there's definitely more coordination between national statistics offices and local governments is so essential to making sure that the local decisions are as informed as possible, but also that we share data back to the national statistical offices. Because again, people are looking for one place to find data. So there's one thing about federal agencies or national agencies making decisions or publishing data, but what our data is being used by is private sector companies, advocates in our communities, people making decisions in other countries that are informed by decisions in another country. And so I think making sure that we have as much coordination as possible. A lot of that happens informally. The World Data Forum is a great convening where lots of local folks also show up with the National Statistics Office. And there are other collaboratives. I lead a collaborative, Open Data Collaborative, that meets every month with African cities. And so we have these informal mechanisms, but there are some formal ways, and I'll just talk about the ones in the US, to kind of ensuring that connection. So in 2017, we founded the Open Government Data Act, which requires all federal agencies to share data and open standards, but also requires a better coordination and open practices between local governments and the national statistics offices. And then there's also another piece I just want to say how important this is that we have, as many other countries do, a Freedom of Information Act, which means that any citizen or resident can ask for information from the government. And often this is the only way in which people get some kind of open data. And sometimes it comes out in PDF formats, which is frustrating. But the ability to kind of prompt a government to open data, whether it's the local or national level, I think is part of the way in which we need to think about the supply chain and the demand side of open data. So we're fortunate in that we're starting to see laws and standards and practices that both empower the individual, but also require the governments themselves to share data in ways that are machine readable as well as human understandable.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it's great to see kind of the open data laws that you mentioned being more, being more kind of increased, particularly kind of with this administration. Joanne, I don't know if you can speak a little bit further on that from the Jakarta experience.
Sure, let me share specific the context in Jakarta, Indonesia, especially about statistics and data, also national and provincial level of government. So for context, in Indonesia, in Jakarta, we have a statistics unit in national level and also in the city or provincial level. At the same time, we also have data agency in national level and also in the provincial level. So if you ask me, in Indonesia, the distinction is quite clear. I'm not sure it is applicable anywhere or in other places. But again, for statistics, they are dealing with a more so-called traditional statistical efforts. I'm referring to like the annual census for the citizen or demography, or they are doing research for 6 months, 12 months. I think those are the responsibilities of the statistical agency. So when they publish data about statistics, typically it's about annual survey, annual statistic, annual summary, and so on. At the same time, for data in both national and provincial or city, they are more dynamic. They are dealing with database, cloud platform, day-to-day analytics, dashboard, and so on. So I think that's the context, especially in Jakarta Smart City. So we are under a data unit or agency, I have to say, and we also have the statistical unit under Jakarta as well. So if you ask me, how can we work together with statistics and data? I think the simplest way, based on the problem statement and use case, we provide data for the statistics team to complement their annual survey or result. And from there, if we need more in-depth research or analysis, then we can work together with them. That is a typical situation. So how we can work between the national level and provincial level, it really depends on the questions or the use case. If it is for city level, then we don't need to engage with the national level. It is okay to work between data and statistics unit in city level. But if we work, let's say, about COVID-19 context in Indonesia, how to reduce poverty across Indonesia, across provinces, for sure, the National Statistics and Data Agency needs to work with all the relevant provinces, especially the critical one. I think in a nutshell, that is the way we work together. I'm not sure, again, as I mentioned, whether it is applicable in other places, but it's the case study that we have in Jakarta, Indonesia. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Yeah, and I think that kind of leads us a little bit to our next question, which I'll also kind of pose to you, Joanne, as well as Eduardo. So I don't know, Joanne, if you'd like to take this one first. And there was a question in the chat kind of on comparability and sort of interoperability. So the question was how to maintain consistency and comparability between national and city level data when it is collected for different purposes. So I know, Joanne, you talked about kind of the management of the different, but if you'd like to elaborate on that further, and then perhaps Eduardo can share some of his experiences within INEGI on this. Thank you.
Sure. Allow me to give candid response. And again, I want to share very openly about our case study. It's not all rosy for sure, and we have our ups and downs, right? And again, I want to share the exact condition that we have. As simple as the challenge, right? Even understanding the simple metrics standardization, I think that's the very, very first step. For example, how do you define poverty? What is the basis? Is it based on the income? Is it based on the expense or what? That's one way, for example, right? Or the second, in national or the provincial level, let's say we have the standard of air quality, for example, right? Have we agreed that if there is deviation, how can we reconcile, right? I think I will start from there. A very simple, basic, important metrics that will be used across agencies in both national and provincial level. It happened even until now, right? But I have to say, this is the good thing. We can talk in a more dynamic manner and we can agree, at least with some of the important metrics. So I think in here, we know the bureaucracy, we know the policy, we need the metrics to be defined and so on, right? But again, when we have open discussion, FGD, and then policy inputs, then we can reshape, we can fine tune, we can redefine the standards. So at least we have a more consistent metrics. So I'm not saying that out of 100, we already define or standardize everything, but at least for the top 10, 20, for example, right? We have more consensus on that. And based on that, I think from there, we can have a better understanding how we can work in the same manner between national level and provincial level. And if you talk about data sharing, we can start from the open data, national level and provincial level. And there are quite a number of integrations and efforts yet to really reconcile this kind of open data. I think that is my candid comment. For sure, you can ask further later. Thank you.
Thanks. Eduardo, if you want to weigh in.
Yes, Alison, thank you. I believe that what UN Statistical Commission do, or ILO, or World Health Organization do for countries, so they set the standards so that we in countries produce data that is comparable, that we can get up to have world figures. This, I think National Statistical Office has to do the same thing, getting down those standards. But those standards will be not enough for the data needed or the data that they produce in cities. So in Mexico, as I said, we have a very well-established statistical system for national figures. So we need to get this down to cities. So data standards so that cities produce the same way, and we can aggregate it to national. As Jean was saying, the idea is not just getting data from National Statistical Office to cities, but also from cities to National Statistical Offices. And for that, we need data standards. And I think National Statistical Office should produce that. But even though will be not enough, because there are a lot of data that are produced in cities, real-time data, geospatial data, that also need more standards than usual, so that we can take advantage of all these things. Dennis was mentioning the civil registry. It's a good example, but I think we need to do much more to get advantage of all the data that is produced in cities. So it's both ways, as Jane was saying, from National Statistical Offices to city data officers, and from city data officers to National Statistical Office. And for that, we need standards, and international standards are, I think, not enough.
Thank you so much. I think standards are becoming a common theme here. The next question, I think, would be a good one for Dennis to answer, because there's a lot of questions also in the chat and pre-submitted kind of about the criteria that define which data should be collected under the management of the national level versus the management of the local level, and how to, taking into context how we define cities versus urban areas and rural areas. So perhaps, Dennis, you could comment on that work. I know you mentioned the work that you guys are doing at the provincial level, but it would be great to get your feedback on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. For the Philippines, the strong legal framework primarily defines the roles of the national government and local levels, the cities, the provinces, the municipalities in managing the data. So I'd like to cite these two laws. The first one, Republic Act 10625, or what we call the Philippine Statistical Act of 2013, stipulates that the Philippine Statistics Authority, my agency, serves as the central statistical authority of the Philippine government on primary data collection. This would include the usual conduct of censuses, surveys on population, housing, agriculture, and the like. What is interesting here is that recently we enacted another law, which is Republic Act 11315, what I mentioned, the Community-Based Monitoring System Act, which stipulates that each city and municipality serve as the primary data collecting authority within its locality on data related to poverty alleviation and economic development. And the linkage between these two laws is that the law stipulates that the Philippine Statistics Authority is the implementing agency that takes charge of the community-based monitoring system. Now, other considerations in terms of the criteria would be, of course, the difficulty in collecting the data, the purpose of the data collection, its objective, whether we generate national level data or local level data. Also, information that is collected sometimes would be very difficult, like health indicators from our National Demographic and Health Survey and income data. It might be difficult to collect this on a bigger scale, given the complexity of gathering this kind of information. However, for easy to collect data like housing characteristics that can be collected at the local level, this is usually handled by the cities, by the municipalities, and is included in our community-based monitoring system. Now, what is important, I think, here is to have the production of local level data to follow what was mentioned, statistical standards and national data quality frameworks, so that this data will be sound basis for policy and program formulation for both the local level and the national level. And as I've said, I think this is the advantage of the Philippine Statistics Authority, because we are the implementing agency for the CBMS. While this is being collected at the local level, we can introduce actually the statistical standards and framework so that we can ensure the quality of the data collected at the local level. Thank you.
Great, great points. We have so many questions coming in, so I think I'm going to try and get to some of the questions in the chat. So one of the questions I think that would be good for perhaps Jean would be, what's your experience of convincing decision makers to make not political but data-driven policies, especially when political polarization is high? I know, I think you've talked about, Mayor Garcetti being a real kind of executive champion, but perhaps you could maybe elaborate on that and maybe talk a little bit also about kind of the citizen engagement program Empower LA, which you guys are doing to empower kind of the neighborhood councils. So Jean, over to you.
Sure. So as Allison mentioned earlier, I'm also a professor at UCLA. And so I inform a lot of the work I do at the city from a perspective of learning and action. And so one of the things we do is to make sure that we have new ideas and more equitable ideas within the government and how we use our data. There's two programs, particularly. One is our data literacy training programs, which are at the neighborhood level. So these are programs we often train in the evenings and on weekends through our local neighborhood councils, of which there's 99 councils in Los Angeles. And we train folks on how to use data to advocate better for what they're interested in, whether it's to get a local park or to, change the traffic pattern in their neighborhood. It could be a very local issue, but often people come to city council not prepared with the information that is going to be convincing to those policy and decision makers. So we help them kind of prepare. We don't tell them what to say. We just help them prepare and how to use that data. And then we also work with 18 local universities in California and Arizona, helping cities, not just Los Angeles, connect with university professors and students who are working in data science or different areas that can work on city data projects. So they bring new ideas, an infusion of new talent. We often hire those students. About 20% of the time we end up hiring those students into city government. But it's a great way for municipalities. Melissa had asked this question in the chat, how people who are maybe in rural areas or don't have as much money to apply to some of these programs, how they can get some support. I think both of those are really important ways in which we bring the community into that decision-making process, so that the politicians, whichever political area they're in, and LA is a relatively surprisingly apolitical place, but being able to help people advocate directly to the decision makers. Mayor Garcetti himself is a former university professor, so I am quite blessed with having a boss who is somebody who understands the need for open data and the use of data and making those advocacies. And I think just helping to put yourself in the role of that decision maker, if you're trying to convince them of either releasing open data or using standards or putting more investment in this, makes such a difference in trying to be from their perspective what they care about. So whether it's climate action or public safety, trying to make sure they understand how that data is going to inform and help their decisions as well.
Great, thank you. And this one I'm gonna give to Dennis. That sort of, I know you at the in the Philippines, you guys have done an amazing job, kind of particularly with the CBMS, fostering citizen engagement. In your, opinion, do you think the NSO could take a more active role in fostering citizen engagement? And how has this worked in practice? I know there were a lot of questions also in terms of kind of securing local level funding. So it'd be great to hear your perspective on that. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Alison. Yes, we are very much engaged with these citizens generated data at the local level of various organizations, for example, and we are also aware about the inequality in terms of funding for our local level data, particularly those involved in the CBMS. We have municipalities, for example, that lack resources. So that's why the National Statistics Office, the Philippine Statistics Authority, is there helping them, helping in the data collection, in the use of technology during the transition, and hopefully in the coming years, they should be able to collect their own data. But we know that because we have about 1,600, more than 1,600 municipalities and cities, and then there is really a various level of funding requirement. And the Philippine Statistics Authority, being the National Statistics Office, is trying to help out on some of these municipalities. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay, just looking through more that are coming into the chat. I think probably a question for Jawan on this one. Perhaps if you could provide an example of how boundaries are defined between national ministries and the City Data Hub, and also how data from the City Data Hub would be used by NSOs, if you could elaborate a little bit further on that.
Sure. I think
Over
let
to
me
you.
use two examples. So the first one is for the COVID-19 example for sure, and second one is our citizen response management system. Yeah. So for the first one, I think for the boundary, for example, right? We have our agency for health in provincial Jakarta level. And yeah, they are able to collect the data from all the labs, for example, and from all the government hospitals. So we know exactly the situation and the bed occupancy, the positive rate, and so on, right? At the same time, we need to understand the macro level, international level, right? So to a certain extent, we need to share the data to the national government. At the same time, after the national government collect that data, they consolidate, they will share certain so-called process data to each of the province. So in this context, there's a proper process, policy, and SOP, what kind of data that should be collected by the provincial government, what is expected, even there is standard for the API, basic columns, and so on to be shared. You imagine we have 30 plus province in Indonesia with very different level of maturity in terms of the technology adoption and so on. But again, that is the standard from the national level, and we share that. After that, they process, and again, they share further, give back to us the process data, especially if you know the application for the COVID-19 monitoring, it is handled or taken care by the national level. So I think that's the one example of the boundary, the way we define. It's a very simple example from the COVID-19 context about health-related data. There are many, many more examples. Let me use the next one, which is the citizen response management system. Just to share the context, initially in Jakarta, somewhere in 2016, we initiated in the first time across Indonesia for the province who started this response management system, whereby all our citizens in Jakarta can share via mobile apps, can be from social media, even from SMS, and we consolidate that responses for complaint or aspirations, and we monitor the way our government agency follow up that question based on the average time and so on, and even we give the weightage, their annual bonus. It really depends on the performance, the way they solve that challenges or that complaint from our citizens. So that is the start where we have this data. And after that, the national level adopted this across Indonesia, right? So they have this kind of reporting system. So I think as one of the most mature province, we share that data and case study to them. And again, we can consolidate the data in the national level as well. I think that's one of the boundary, and we can tell as well what kind of pattern in the summary level, in the national level, so we can know the situation. I think that's one of the example, and really depends on case by case, because you can't define exactly the scope, the SOP. Sometimes it really depends on the case study, the use case. And let's say we talk about national disasters, for sure. I think the national agency will have more authority and more ideas, yeah, and also initiatives about that. I think those are some of the examples that I can share for the Jakarta, Indonesia context. Thank you.
Fantastic. The next question I'm going to give over to Eduardo. So unfortunately, many city and county plans are often not reviewed by state or national governments. Are you familiar with any cutting edge data sharing opportunities and examples that can aggregate or extrapolate data from these documents?
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, I think that planning came down in the world agenda when economic systems were more market oriented. But nowadays, I guess planning is back, and it's back because of the data revolution. Now we have more data to follow up on objectives and to monitor if those objectives are really connected. So planning, I do believe, is a big opportunity to involve citizens, just like with SDGs. Imagine that in cities we have councils of citizens to monitor how the city is moving on in terms of getting the objectives of SDGs. In the past, probably was not that on our agenda, but now we can have dashboards to follow up on the specific indicators of SDGs, but together with citizens. And also with SDGs, we can have more forward-looking, not looking just for the next year or the next 2 years, but really looking for the next decade or next 2020 or 2030. So planning now, I guess, is a great opportunity to introduce data in decision making. And SDGs is doing, I think, a great work to get this planning structure into the cities again. I think it was back, but now planning is getting now the moment because of the data revolution.
Great. So I think we've only got a couple of minutes left, and I want to make sure that each of our panelists can just provide very brief reflections kind of on what we've heard today. I think it'll be great to hear from each of you, even if you could reflect on some key things that you want the audience to take away, and if there's, potentially any suggestions for how to break down the silos between these two, between the city and the national level. So I think we'll go in reverse order. If Dennis, you want to start first, then we'll do Juan, Jean, and then end with Eduardo. Over to you, Dennis.
I think having a very effective linkage between the national and city level data would allow policymakers to identify overlapping concerns and formulate inclusive action plans, which will promote a more efficient way of allocating resources. I think that's the general message. We really need to allocate the resources, both for the national and the city level requirements. Now, national and city level data that are linked together will provide a good spatial perspective of development in a particular concern among all of our population. And in our case, in the Philippines, for example, we have this benefit between the synergy from the national level data and the local level data, the national level data being produced by the Philippine Statistics Authority and the local level data being produced by our local government units. But as I mentioned in my remark a while ago, what is important here is that we follow the statistical standards and we provide the national data quality framework to the data produced by our local governments, our cities, that would guarantee the quality of the data that will be used for sound policy making and policy programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Juan?
Two brief points from me. The first one, be clear with our problem statement or use case because it will define also the impact or the urgency and also the way we work or collaborate together. That's the first one about problem statement and use case. Second one, although we know in national and city level, there will be a boundary, authority, and so on, but I think each of us, which is each of the agency, needs to have open mindset and also collaborative mindset. I think, especially in this digital context, this kind of mindset should be encouraged. And of course, I have to say, it may not be applicable to all at this point, but I really wish, especially in Indonesia, that more agencies to have this kind of open and collaborative mindset. Thank you.
Great. Jean?
So I think there's two ways to be able to kind of make these data organizations working together. One is through advocacy for policies and data acts like we have in the US and other nations also have, to be able to sort of legislate your way towards integration. I know that we worked years ago on data.gov with schema.org and Google actually, so that you can search for data types and file types specifically through a Google search, which helps just like brute force our way into whether people are sharing or not. We can just find those data sets ourselves and look for which government organizations and entities are sharing data and then be able to combine them ourselves. There's a really interesting initiative that's going on in the US right now called Justice 40. And that's related to infrastructure planning and building, as well as environmental justice. And so this is a national local collaboration with a White House initiative that's looking at the data standards we need to put in place to be able to share and measure the impact our infrastructure planning and spending is having on communities that have been particularly left behind in the past. So this really addresses a lot of rural areas as well. And I think this is a really great example, Justice 40, of an organization that, in a way, to make that collaborative happen. And I just want to give a shout out to a person in the chat who mentioned disaggregated data, particularly around the gender spectrum. So, you know, different cities have different aspects around this, but in Los Angeles, we localized the SDGs because for us, gender equity, for example, is about the gender spectrum. We wanted to be able to address that. And so when we think about data, we also need to think about disaggregating that data in a way that makes it actionable by people. We looked at, we have a regional procurement platform to make procurement more equitable for small businesses across the LA region with about $15 billion of procurements available. We couldn't answer the question about how much are we spending with Black-owned businesses because we didn't disaggregate that data at the national level. And so businesses registered at the national level could not, we couldn't answer that information. So we had to like create that data and start it all afresh. So I think the ability to make local decisions and work towards equity really requires this coordination between national and local levels, but also the ability for us as data scientists to advocate for that.
Thanks, Jean. And Eduardo?
Thank you, Alison. I would say that we see in the market many data science companies that help organizations to organize their data, to combine this data with external data, to model this data, and to prepare it for decision-making within the organization. I dream that we have the equivalent in cities so that they have more value of the data combined with external data, model the data, and then prepared for decision-making at local levels. And for that, I think National Statistical Offices and geospatial information authorities have an important role to play.
Thank you so much. We've had such an engaging conversation today, as we can see from the chat, and there's a lot more we could discuss here. I'd really like to thank our panelists for their really excellent and insightful remarks. I will just very, very briefly sum up a few of the key themes that have come out strongly. The need to connect to local data, to think globally and act locally, as Jean mentioned, the importance of working across boundaries and really garnering more value from the data, as Joanne mentioned, creating synergies with local data across the across the provincial and national level, and enabling sort of standards and legal frameworks, as Dennis mentioned, and then of course the importance of the enabling environment and the linkage between the two communities, as Eduardo mentioned. So I'd also like to thank the UN Statistics Division for organizing this webinar, and to you all for joining. And please follow the UN World Data Forum website and Twitter for the most up-to-date information. And we hope to see you at another session soon. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you, Alison.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.